The first few years of the flip phone revival were a wild ride. Samsung went from charging nearly $1,400 for a lot of compromise in February 2020 to asking just $999 for a flippin flagship in August 2021. That price tag stuck around through Flip 4 and held fast even when the Flip 5 debuted with its oversized cover screen last summer. So it's kind of strange that Samsung chose this year to add a C note to the asking price, especially since there's not much to the Galaxy Flip6 that seems to justify it. And for foldable freaks, it's frustrating to find all the same speed bumps that prevent that cover screen from living up to its full potential. But the improvements Samsung has included directly address the concerns of a more important target market. Folks who want a flagship phone with a versatile camera that's easier to carry without sacrificing durability or power. The Flip 6 gets most of the way there. Not with the fun irreverence of Motorola or the honeymoon-phase excitement of newcomer Xiaomi, but through little refinements driven by 5 generations of hard-won experience. I'm Mr. Mr. Mobile, and I've spent 3 weeks with it. Let's see if those refinements are worth that bonus Benjamin. Durability continues to be the key category in which foldables fall behind their classic counterparts, so I'm glad to see Samsung put its focus there for Flip 6. The new hinge is even stiffer than on Flip 5, making it posable at almost any angle. Big win for those of us who like to take our calls slightly bananafied. Samsung says the new hinge also better distributes the shock of external impacts, something I confirmed when I had the bright idea to try to film a bike ride to the studio one morning. Pro tip, don't do this, because I dropped my review unit on the concrete at a good 10-mile-an-hour clip. Imagine my relief when, upon its return by a helpful jogger, I found only superficial damage, including scratches to the armor aluminum's finish and a slightly out-of-true spine. Functionally, nothing was broken.
Tough little ship. Little.
Yeah, just like on Fold 6, those new speakers are great. Samsung changed up the inside, too, increasing the display's maximum brightness to match the rest of its lineup, and making the glass a little less ultra-thin to give it better impact resistance, and beefing up the protective layer above that UTG with the same shear thickening fluid I talked about in my Fold 6 review. Now, these are improvements you can see and feel. For the first time in a few years, the crease really does appear smaller, on par with the competition. And while I'm sure you could dent this screen protector with a fingernail, given enough force, the days of doing so accidentally in normal use finally seem like they're behind us. And when I used it to time-lapse this absolutely wild storm blowing in across New York Harbor, the phone's IP48 rating rendered it unbothered by the resulting raindrops. Admittedly, I'm not sure how well the Gorilla Glass Victus 2 would have withstood any of that abuse naked, because my review unit has been shielded by the scratch protection of my sponsor, dbrand. I really value texture and character in a phone finish, neither of which are offered by most of Samsung's desaturated satin options this year. So I went with dbrand's futuristic matrix skin for a while, and eventually settled back into my old favorite. It looks like real leather because it is. If neither of those resonates with you, dbrand has tons of alternatives. I think next time I'll try the X-ray edition. Dbrand your device down in the description. Let's talk software for a sec. Back in my Fold 6 review, I told you I might touch on more Galaxy AI features in this one, but perhaps predictably, they're just not proving all that useful. I like the wallpaper that superimposes current weather conditions over a photo, when it decides to work, and the voice recorder that transcribes interviews or meetings, even though it sometimes thinks I'm two separate people, despite being the only one speaking. Yeah, I feel like every one of these AI features is sort of half-baked. Outside of carefully curated demos, they mostly just don't deliver on all the hype that's teed them up. But Samsung's biggest missed opportunity is still out here, on the so-called Flex window. When Motorola showed off what was possible with an almost completely unlocked cover screen on last year's Razr Plus, my advice was, hey Moto, sell as many of these as you can, because Samsung is going to do exactly the same thing on the Flip 5. Yet, the Flip 5 did not do that. Instead, it delivered a much more restricted and limited UX. And now, a full year later, the Flip 6 has the same limitations. Like, even if you run a custom keyboard on the main screen, you're still stuck with the Samsung keyboard out here. There's still the abstraction layer that prevents you from doing things like confirming two-factor authentication challenges. There's still no proper task switcher for multitasking. Apps won't rotate on the cover, so with an app like Zipcar, for example, the buttons you use to lock and unlock the car are cut off. The quick settings aren't customizable, so you can't do things like enable hotspot or reverse charging without opening the phone. Last year's annoying inertial scrolling is still here, so I often swipe past widgets by scrolling too hard. And while you can run any app you want on the cover, you still need to take too many steps to get there. You do that using Good Lock, Samsung's set of power tools for users who want to customize everything. It's fun. You can tweak colors, icons, flip the task switcher back in time to ice cream sandwich, just generally futz with so much of the design that, well, you're likely to come away with a total dog's breakfast. And that's awesome, because that's user choice, the very core of what makes Android great. So why can't Good Lock modify almost anything on the cover screen? The most obvious answer is that Samsung just didn't find it important enough to prioritize. And maybe it has user data that backs that up. Maybe so few people care about these details that it wouldn't be economical to expend the resources. To be fair to Samsung, it has added a ton of widgets to an already big catalog. But the Razr has taught me how fun and useful it can be to have, well, kind of a tiny phone on the cover of my real phone. And speaking for myself, I just can't go back to Samsung's sandbox. Sadly, that means I'm consigned to an inferior camera system on the Moto. Because while the Flip 6 and Razr Plus each sport a 50-megapixel main camera, Samsung wisely stuck with the ultra-wide for the secondary, instead of Motorola's move to a 2x telephoto with very limited utility. Also, the Flip 6 is really well designed for the run-and-gun social media shooting Samsung is pushing so hard in its marketing. All flip phones can serve as their own tripod, but Samsung's stiff hinge makes it useful at more angles. And Flex Mode lets you put the viewfinder on either side of the screen. That Flex Mode came in handy when I was filming both A and B roll for the last 2 reviews on the channel. For those time lapses I teased earlier, and for a quick and dirty Instagram reel, Crackberry Kevin and I decided to film on a whim for clicks. It also let me leverage a convenient road cone to shoot the departure of a regular fixture on my Red Hook shoreline, the MSC Meraviglia, or as my dad calls her, the Very Biglia. Sure, I could have shot this handheld, but I love the sense of scale you get from my tiny figure in the foreground, dwarfed by this colossus backing down Buttermilk Channel. Incidentally, that video also let me stress test the phone's new vapor chamber, meant to cool down its Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 processor. For 8 continuous minutes in 90-degree heat, the phone filmed in 4K while roasting in direct and indirect sunlight. But it never gave up. In fact, the only time I could get it to overheat was on a day closer to 100 degrees while running Android Auto in a car whose AC hadn't yet cooled the car down. We're still waiting for a clamshell camera system that truly stuns. Maybe I'll find that in Xiaomi's new Mix Flip, to be featured in a flip phone face-off coming soon. But across 3 weeks of testing, the Flip 6 almost never let me down. From portraits in Paris, pensive and otherwise, to ultra-cool Spotify sessions in Mexico City, to cute kitty captures back in Brooklyn. The only consistent complaints I had were its constant tendency to overexpose, and, say it with me, long-suffering Samsung stans, its failure to freeze moving subjects. That puts us firmly in been here, said that territory, so I'll take my customary moment of silence to let you absorb a few uncommented upon samples before we wrap up with battery and a bonus feature. Speaking of been here, said that, the Flip 6 is the latest in a long line of phones that'll last you all day. But just barely. On the days I've really hammered the 4,000 mAh battery with hours of Android Auto, lots of mobile hotspot, and endless photo and video, I could drive it below 15% by the 9-hour mark. That's insanely heavy usage, though. More commonly, I ended 12 to 16-hour days with about 20% left over. Still, I can't help thinking that if the cover screen were more capable, I wouldn't need to open the phone as much, saving more power. And as ever, I deeply wish the phone charged faster than 25 watts. 2 hours to go from empty to full is just the weakest of sauce. Taken together, all this might sound like the Flip 6 is a bit of a mixed bag, but I don't think that's the case. It's not a phone for foldable power users who want to optimize every detail, and it's not a statement piece made to appease jaded tech YouTubers like me who desperately want Samsung to show some semblance of its old trailblazing self. What it is a product that delivers what so many of us wanted back when this whole foldable adventure started. A flagship Android smartphone that just happens to fold in half. That means Samsung has designed it much like its bar-type smartphones, right down to offloading a lot of the fun to the case it knows you're going to buy anyway. This is the Flip Suit cover from Samsung. You may remember me showing you some earlier versions of this in the S24 Ultra review, but this one uses NFC to power built-in LEDs and also bundles a custom wallpaper to go with it. You probably know it. I hate cases. That's why I debrand. But I kinda love this one. More lights on phones. More fun on phones, please. If you're Flip curious, you'll want to be sure to cross-shop the much cheaper Motorola Razr 2024 family. See my earlier review on both of those. But if you can get a good trade-in deal from Samsung to take the sting out of the too high price point, well, the Galaxy Flip 6 may not be the most ambitious expression of the flip phone experience in 2024, but it is the most mature. This video was produced following 3 weeks with a Flip 6 review sample provided by Samsung, which also provided travel, lodging, and food and drink for Mr. Mobile and other media at Samsung Unpacked in Paris. Portions of this review were also shot in Mexico City, where I was a guest of Spotify under identical terms. But neither company had any editorial input or copy approval rights concerning this content, not even an early preview, and I was paid no compensation in exchange for its production. Subscribe to the Mr. Mobile on YouTube if you'd like to see more videos like this. Until next time, from Michael Fisher, Captain Two Phones on Threads, thanks for watching. And stay mobile, my friends.